Well, wow. It's good to see all of you here. Um, this is going to be the third lesson that I presented on the resurrection of Jesus. If you missed the others, you can find them on our web or YouTube site, Bethany Church of Christ, Oklahoma, and it'll have the last two lessons that I've done. This is kind of a series, but they also function independently so that you'll hopefully understand this one. Um, I'm putting so much emphasis on the resurrection. I'm doing it during this season because this is the time people are thinking about it. As was mentioned, the first church celebrated the resurrection of Jesus every Sunday, and we celebrate it in the communion. Jesus didn't just die and remain there, he was resurrected. And so we celebrate that. But it's clearly the Bible teaches that the whole Christian religion stands or falls on the resurrection. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 14, he said, if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is vain or useless, and your faith also is vain. So if Jesus hasn't been raised, then talking about Jesus and having faith is a waste of time. Then he goes on in verse 17, he says, and if Christ has not been raised, your faith is worthless. You are still in your sins. So, how important is the resurrection? Well, the resurrection is what Christianity is built on. If Jesus was not resurrected, there is no Christianity. The whole Christian religion, your religion, stands or falls on whether the man Jesus was raised from the dead. If he wasn't raised from the dead, you're wasting your time. We might as well just go home. We're wasting our time. Um, if he wasn't raised, then what you and I believe is a lie. We're here today. If Jesus wasn't raised, we're here today because we believed a lie. Uh, so, and if Jesus wasn't raised, then you and I are fools. We're morons for believing something that's not true. So, the Christian religion is the religion that believes that the man Jesus was crucified and came back to life after 3 days, that he was resurrected. It's all based on that. The whole Christian religion. It's not because Jesus was good. It's not because Jesus was a good teacher. It's not because he said nice things. It's not because our parents believe in Jesus. It's not because America's used to be basically a Christian nation. It's because Jesus was raised from the dead. And we have to determine if there's enough evidence. I mean, if we're going to be honest, then we have to determine whether there's enough evidence for us to believe that that event actually happened. It's just like a jury trial. I don't know if any of you have been on a jury. You have, okay. Who else has been on jury? I'm curious. Raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Some of us older folks. Um, you go in and nobody witnessed this. There's a crime. Nobody saw it, but there's enough what we call circumstantial evidence. And if the circumstantial evidence is strong enough, you can convict a person of murder. And in the old days, they used to kill them. They used to execute them, take them to the electric chair or hang them for murder. If and nobody witnessed it, but the circumstantial evidence around it is so strong that a jury is willing to pass the death sentence. And nobody here has seen Jesus resurrected, yet we believe he was. I do. I assume you do. So what evidence Why do we believe it? Many of us, unfortunately, are doing it just because our parents believed it. And that's okay to begin with, but eventually you've got to come to grips with it yourself. Did it really happen? And if it happened, how do we know? And do I even know what the circumstantial evidences are to base my belief in? Well, here's the bottom line. The New Testament, which is half of the Bible, first half is Old Testament, second half is New Testament. New Testament is a compilation of documents about the man Jesus and that he's resurrected and what that means in our lives. And so, how do I know that Jesus was resurrected? Well, the New Testament says so. You say, wait a minute. That's a cop out because the New Testament is a religious book. Of course, it's going to say Jesus is resurrected. Well, the problem with that is if you think that, then you're uninformed. Because the New Testament is not a religious book. It talks about religion and it creates a religion, but it's not a religious book per se. It's a historical document. The New Testament is a compilation of documents that were discovered that are historical and that they're historical records of an event. And the first church began believing that Jesus the man was killed by the Romans and resurrected from the dead 3 days later, and it was written about, and those writings were compiled in what we call the New Testament. And so what do I mean? Why is that important that it's a historical book? Because all historians, this is a key. I started 3 Sundays ago, and I mention it every time because it's key. All historians who study history, professors, historical philosophers, all of them agree that the New Testament documents are historically correct. So if they're historically correct, then why don't the atheist historians become believers? Well, they say that it's all historically correct except the miracles. The people were so primitive they mistook other things and thought they were miracles. But when you examine that, it won't bear out. Uh, in fact, the New Testament, these documents we have right here, are the best historical records we have from that period of time. If you go to a university and study ancient history, you'll study about Rome and Greece and all of these countries and what they did, and the historical documents that those books are written from are very scanty compared to what we have in the New Testament as historical documents. So the New Testament documents are far superior to all the other historical records that we have. So the uh, atheist, non believing historians never deny the historical record of the New Testament. If they tried to, they'd be laughed out of their profession. And so there's some things, and I'm kind of going over material I covered the last 2 weeks, but the things that all historians, even atheist historians, if you went to a university, Harvard, Oxford, any of them, and took an ancient history class, and he talks about Jesus, and he has to talk about Jesus because he's a historical person. And if the professor is an atheist, he doesn't believe in God, he still has to believe some facts from history. Number one, that the man Jesus lived in Israel a little over 2,000 years ago, just like the New Testament says. That the man Jesus began with a group of followers and with 12 apostles, just like the New Testament says. That it was reported that the man Jesus worked miracles, and that was even reported by the authorities who opposed him, just like the New Testament says. That he was crucified by the Romans, and the Romans pronounced him dead, just like the New Testament says. That Jesus was buried in a known tomb according to the custom of the Jews, just like the New Testament says. That's the only place they learn that material from. If you pick up an Encyclopedia Britannica, which is not a religious book, look up Jesus, they'll list these facts. Guess where they got those facts from? New Testament. Because it's history, and they have to accept it as history. It's reported that on the third day, his followers claimed that he was raised from the dead, and many witnesses said they saw him alive and even spent time with him, just like the New Testament says. And that he appeared to over 500 people at one time, just like the New Testament says. That most of the people who witnessed the resurrection and went around saying that he was resurrected were persecuted and died for their testimony that they saw him resurrected. And there's a basic fact of human nature. People don't die for what they know is a lie. So the first time they would take those people and put a knife to their throat and say, if you say Jesus was resurrected, we're going to kill you, they said, kill us. If they were lying, they'd say, whoa, 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 wait a minute. And then tens of thousands of Jews in the city of Jerusalem, just a few short years, believed their testimony about the resurrection and became followers of Jesus. And they too were persecuted because they believed that. Their homes were taken away from them, and they suffered poverty because of it. And a lot of people over the whole known world just a few years later believe that Jesus, the man Jesus, was resurrected. All these points, all historians, even atheist historians, believe those points to be true. Those are the previous two lessons. Just need to kind of bring you up to there. So, again, if you want to look at them, you can go to YouTube and look at that. The text I want to focus on this morning, so I'm just now starting my sermon, right? Is found in John chapter 20. And I think it's going to be projected. But anyway, he begins in verse 1. Now, on the first day of the week, and that's Sunday, by the way, Mary Magdalene came early to the tomb while it was still dark and saw the stone already taken away from the tomb. So she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, that we believe that to be the Apostle John, and said to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. So Peter and the other disciple went forth, and they were going to the tomb. The two were running together, and the other disciple ran ahead faster than Peter and came to the tomb first. And stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. And so Simon Peter also came, following him, and entered the tomb. And he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple who had first come to the tomb then also entered, and he saw and believed. Believed what? So what we have, Mary Magdalene comes to the tomb. She finds the stone moved. She runs to Simon Peter and John and reports that the body had been taken out of the tomb. The two apostles run to the tomb. They find only the linen wrappings lying there. Now, there's an important thing from the Greek. I hate to use Greek because you can understand the Bible without knowing Greek, but there's some nuances there in the Greek. The lying there, what the English says the linen cloths were lying there, uses a Greek word chemena. They were chemena. And what that means is in their original state. So the cloth, the linen cloths were not thrown off and disheveled and thrown around. When they walked in, they saw the linen wrapping laying there in its original position. That's what's implied in the Greek. And the idea is that the body passed through when the body was raised, passed through the linen wrappings, and the linen wrappings collapsed. And they're just lying there. And so, and we know Jesus' resurrected body, he wasn't a ghost, because when he appeared to them later, they thought he was a ghost. They started screaming, "Ah, ghost!" And he said, "Oh, whoa, whoa, I'm not a ghost. It's me. Touch me. Put your fingers in the wounds." And he said, "Give me something to eat." And he ate in front of them because ghosts don't eat, right? So he has a physical resurrected body, but he can appear and disappear in a closed room. And so his body, his new spiritual body, evidently passed through those grave clothes and left them behind. Somebody had taken the body of grave robbers, had taken the body. They wouldn't have taken time to unwrap the grave clothes, take the body, and put them back, right? Or if Jesus had resuscitated. There's a difference between resuscitation and resurrection. Resuscitation means that this body was injured, they thought you were dead, and you came back to life in this body. And some people argued that that happened. But if he had resuscitated, he wouldn't have unwrapped himself, got up, and then put it back. So that fact alone means they went and they saw something that caused them to believe. Okay. Now I want to talk about what they saw, uh, and I want to talk about that linen cloth that he was wrapped in. And the history of this is the cloth itself. There's a cloth that they've discovered and they call it the shroud because a shroud is what you buried people in. Um, but they have found what they believe, and I believe is the original linen wrappings that Jesus had been buried in, which were left behind when Jesus' body was raised from the dead. Let's see the first slide. This is a picture of it. Now, that doesn't look like much unless you look at it more carefully. Let's see if this will work on it. Yeah, okay. So, this is one cloth. The body was laid down and the cloth was draped over. Okay. Or here's his back. He was laid down there. This part of the cloth is draped over him, over the head. This is the head. This is Jesus' face right here. This is his body. His arms are crossed and his hands are folded. These are his legs. This is his back. Okay, the backside of his head and his legs and his back. These marks were left later because the shroud got caught in a fire. So part of the shroud got burned, but they rescued it before it was destroyed. But this is all one long cloth that Jesus was laid on and it was wrapped over the top of it. Show the next slide. This is kind of giving you an idea of how big it is. The people around it, this is how big it is. And it's displayed. It left this image. No one can explain the image. Even modern science can't reproduce the image. What they do when they study this, they find that there is no pigmentation. Give me the next slide. This is what we believe happened because the image on the cloth is like a photo. Any of photographers have experience with photography. Back in the old days, before cell phones, before digital photography, they had film. And film is sensitive to light. So when you have film in your camera, you snap it, and the shutter goes, and and it allows lightning for a second. And that light hits the film and leaves an impression, and the image is a negative image. So this is what they believe probably happened, that when Jesus' body was resurrected, his body produced, creating the new creation body, created such a flash of light that left the image on the shroud. Because there's no, listen, this is important, there's no pigmentation, there's no pigment of pencil, charcoal, ink, paint. There's no pigment in the cloth other than blood. Blood is the only natural pigment that's in the cloth. Here's the important point. This is what convinced me that it's the genuine deal. I have tried to reach. They can't. So the image was photo or not copied. It was photo imaged onto the shroud. Give me the next picture. Next slide. There we go. This is what we have. This is the front side. Now, in 1800, a photographer was allowed to go in and shoot a picture of the shroud. Well, as you saw the previous one, it's a negative. But when they shot a negative with a camera, it produced two negatives to create what? A positive. So for the first time in 1800, the photographer took a picture of it and it produced the image in a positive image that was on the shroud. And this is the image that was produced. And there's the face of the person that was on the shroud. Here's the backside. Now all these stripes that you see, I don't know if you can see them right there, his legs, his arms, there's blood up and down his arms here. Actually, the blood is flowing from his wrist down because the crucifixion would have had his arms up like this and the blood flowed down. And that's the way the blood is. There's blood on his forehead in the form of a crown of thorns. There's you can't see it very well, but he has a pierced side right here on the right side. So this is a crucified man that had been flogged so severely that there's not hardly an inch of his body. You can see all the marks on his body, backside, back, buttocks, legs, everything has been whipped. But this is the image that was produced in a positive slide. So, how was it produced? And like I said, scientists that examine this today don't know how it was done. I'm convinced because of that, because it's not been drawn on there or painted on it, that some photo impressed on the shroud on the cloth that there was such a bright, brilliant light. And I've read some arguments that it was like on an atomic level, that its body glowed so brightly when it was changed, when it was resurrected, that it left this imprint on the cloth. And so scientists have not been able to reproduce. Scientists today have not been able to reproduce. Next slide. Da-da, da-da. If we get the next slide, what they have found recently in the last 2 years is they put this through some of the new testing that they can do, and it produced a 3D image of the shroud. of the man in the shroud. Now, what that means is if somebody had drawn it, they don't have the ability to draw something. When the shroud is on the face of Jesus, what does it do? It doesn't just stay flat. It folds down over his head and over his body, between his arms, and so on. And this new imaging technology that they have shows that 3D effect of the cloth wrapping itself on the body. Are we going to be able to get it? Probably not. Oh, I hate that because it's a good slide. So uh, God has given us her in Italy and have seen. There it is. I don't know if you can see that, but this is 3D. It's a 3D effect. Uh, this shows the wrapping of the cloth around it, which I believe is the nail. It's the proof of the word. It says this is an actual picture. Well, you don't know that's actually Jesus. Well, who else would it be? He has all the wounds. Blood is the only pigmentation in the cloth. There's blood around his brow. You can see where his body has been whipped severely with blood in his wrist. By the way, that's another thing. The arguments that I've read said that somebody around 1200 AD, 1200 years after crucifixion, reproduced or produced it. Well, in the 1200s, actually starting about 600 or 700 AD, they started doing paintings of Jesus and showing his crucifixion with the nails in his hands. Okay? And all the pictures you'll see if you go to cathedrals and Beck and I traveled over in all the Orthodox churches and Catholic churches where they have paintings. They show him hanging there with nails in his hands, in the palms of his hands. That's not how the Romans crucified him. For one, a hand, if you put nails there and put the weight of the body on the hand, which is full. The way they did it is they put it through the rib. And the reason the Latin got it wrong is because the Greek says that they drove nails to his hand, to the headia, the hand. But in Greek, headia means hands or wrist. And so they thought it was hands. And so all of the pictures showed Jesus with nail prints in his hands, when in reality they were through his wrist. And this one, the pictures that I've showed you, the shroud showed the nail prints in his wrist. In fact, you can see, not much, but right there, you can see one of the nail prints through his wrist. So there's too much there to stay at the forefront. Just too much there. I'm a skeptical person. I have to be convinced. But and I've been studying about the shroud, reading it off and on, studying it for probably 50 years. And I've come to believe that this is it. This is it. Put that slide up of his face showing both, that one right there. I believe, based on that, this is I believe that when the disciples went in the tomb and saw the linen cloth lying there, they saw it. Now, history indicates, tradition indicates that later on the ladies gathered up that shroud and kept it, and then it got passed down from generation to generation. This is a positive. I believe you have to make your own mind up about this. The fact that science can't reproduce today. That if somebody had tried to forge it, if If this was a forgery in the first century, or later on, say 1,200 years later, they didn't know what a negative image was. Nobody knew what negative images were until the 1800s when they got into photography. So why would a forger create a negative image? They just wouldn't. There's too much there. And so I'm convinced that what you're looking at is the actual face of Jesus. Now, why am I showing for us to worship the face of Jesus? And some people do that. No, because I want you to realize that there's something tangible that proves the empty tomb. There's something that if you went to Turin, Italy, and they let you, they won't let you, but if they let you, you can go in and handle this cloth. You can touch the linen. You could run your hands over that negative image. But it's real because he's real and he resurrected. And that's the only explanation for this cloth. That's resurrection is the only explanation for the image on that cloth. There is no other explanation. And they have been trying for centuries to try to disprove this cloth, and they can't do it. Jesus was raised. And stooping and looking in, they saw the linen wrappings lying there in their place. But he did not go in. And so Simon Peter also came following him and entered the tomb, and he saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the face cloth which had been on his head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. So the other disciple who had first come to the tomb then also entered and saw and believed. The question is can you see? Can you see and believe? We can read about the circumstantial evidence. Most people, thousands of Jews, became believers in Jesus' resurrection just within 5 or 6 years after it happened. They didn't have any. All they had was circumstantial evidence. They had the witnesses that came and said, "We saw him. We saw it happen." They saw these men dying for testifying that they saw him. And so thousands of Jews converted and became Christians based on their testimony. Now we add to that evidence the same linen wrappings that the apostles saw lying in the tomb. I want this today. My prayer before I got up here was that it would strengthen your faith in the resurrection of Jesus. That it would cause you to realize this is not some thing. Christianity is not just something my parents believed and therefore I go to church and they went to church on Easter, so I'm going to go to church on Easter. This is real. This is a reality. There was a man named Jesus or Yeshua in Hebrew who was killed by the Romans who claimed he was the Son of God. They killed him on a cross and he was resurrected. And this is evidence of that. Do you see and believe? And so Jesus, after his resurrection, came and said and announced this, which is a wonderful thing. He said, everyone who believes in the resurrection, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Son of God and is baptized shall be saved. Free salvation because of his resurrection. And I was talking to the class this morning. We were talking about what does saved mean. Saved means not just having your sins forgiven, but being saved from death. And Jesus promised that he's going to return and give resurrected bodies to all his believers. That if Jesus were to come right now, all the graves that are all over the world right now would be emptied, that people would stand up with new bodies just like his and enter into eternal life. Some into eternal life, some into judgment. Do you see? Let's have an invitation song.